Welcome to the Writer Reads Short Stories. This is Lord of the Vortex, Part 2. Pretty lady? That voice was kind of familiar, although this time I was hearing it inside my head instead of through my ears. Something about that struck me as odd. Not right. Maybe even not good. I licked my lips. I tried to lick my lips, couldn't find a tongue. No lips either. Don't try to speak yet. That voice was very distracting. Why couldn't I lick my lips? Do you remember the crash? I tried to nod, couldn't feel my head. Panic unfurled in my chest, and I couldn't feel that either. Easy there. You're going to be okay. He was trying hard to reassure me, but I could see the deep pain in his eyes, the lines in his face. What's wrong? I asked, and then gasped. My voice was not my own. He reached toward me, touched the panel above my face, tucked his chin to his chest and drew a shaky breath. Another voice intruded. Footsteps shook my insides. My lord? I watched as he turned his head, caught the movement as he raised his hand and quickly wiped his eyes, then wiped more carefully before turning fully to face the newcomer. I could feel his footsteps too. Daverell. It was a name, an acknowledgement of the other's presence. My lord. The other man came into view, glanced across at me, then looked more carefully at his lord. She'll fly. Daverell glanced toward me once again. Are you sure? You've told her already? Told her? I wondered what I needed to be told. Assumed I was the only her in the room. His lordship shook his head. You haven't told her. Then how do you know she'll cope, let alone fly? I decided I didn't like him very much. I'd survived the crash. Of course I'd cope. I'll fly, I said, and again my voice sounded wrong. Both men looked up, startled, glancing around them as though trying to work out where the voice was coming from. I continued, Get me to a ship, and I'll fly. Daverell looked startled, and then horrified. My lord, you have to tell her. His lordship stared him down. She held a ship together through a botched vortex transit, held it mostly together through the crash. She'll cope, and she'll fly. There, that should tell him. But Daverell merely glanced at the both of us and made a motion with his finger that was just short of an order, telling his lordship to turn around and talk to me. With a sigh, his lordship turned away from Daverell and placed both hands on the surface either side of my head. Do you know where you are? He asked. I'm in another dimension, I said, and scrambled for a memory that was reluctant to surface. We crashed. I glanced around, trying to turn my head. No head. I couldn't feel my head. The panic spread into my stomach and out along my limbs. I trembled, and the deck beneath their feet shuddered. You've hooked her in already? Daverell was afraid. He was whispering, as though that could stop me from hearing. I thought the sensors in the pod were very good, because he was standing 5 feet away. Medpods usually don't pick up that far. It's supposed to ensure the patient doesn't overhear anything about their condition before the medics break it to them. Odd how much was similar in this dimension. She thinks she's in a med pod by all the stars. My lord, you have to tell her. I reached for the pod's controls, found something that reminded me of sight. Hooked in. When I saw the outside of the ship, I swallowed. I tried to swallow. Couldn't find my throat. I wanted to reach up and try to open the pod from the inside. Couldn't find my hands. I couldn't feel my arms, my legs. I tried for another connection, saw the entry bay, the cargo bay, the captain's cabin, one of the crew cabins, and well, that made me pause. I wondered if Daverell and his lordship knew those two had already come aboard. I looked again, knew I was blushing, but could not feel any heat across my skin. I returned to the console and looked up at the man who'd woken me. My lord? He had been looking at Daverell. Now he turned to me. I kept going, ignoring the weird echoes in my voice. I was in a crash. What is wrong with me? I saw his throat work as he swallowed, saw the way his hand moved as he opened his mouth to say something, and then thought better of it. When he did speak, I knew he was lying. There is nothing wrong with you. Yeah, there is. I can't feel my head, my hands, my legs, my arms. I can't lick my lips or feel my throat, and I can see. I remembered the scene in the crew cabin, diverted myself from reality. Did you know you had two crewmen aboard already? That they're cavorting in the third cabin aft? Dvorash and Samuel, Davarel said, like it wasn't a surprise. I remembered something of the breathless whispers that passed between the two, inadvertently tapped into the audio circuit in the cabin and channeled it through, and just as hastily switched it off. Davarel snorted and turned away, but I was starting to get the hang of this visual thing. I went to another cam, just in time to see him trying to contain his laughter, just in time to see the laughter die and sudden pain appear in his eyes. Tell her, he said, his voice harsh with emotion. Tell me what? I asked. That you've patched me into the ship's sensors by mistake? I stopped as I realized something else. Which ship is this, anyway? I thought we were crashing into a planet. This time his lordship spoke before I could say anything else. You were. You did. You did crash into a planet. I tried to bring you in gentle, but I didn't know the ship. Couldn't stop the spin. You broke apart. The computer downloaded into my skull, I said, remembering. I tried to push it into the pod, but there was no room. I stopped, exploring my memory, and found the old ship, neatly filed and stored. I found new files as well. Some were labeled as memories, and some were instruction manuals. There were circuit maps, and I could identify the visual and audio wiring in the ship. I also found the security protocols, as well as how much fuel was in my tanks, the balance of the onboard life support systems, and the manual advising what it should be. These all seemed to be hardwired into my head. His lordship was speaking again. I know. We salvaged as much of the data as we could, and you downloaded my head into a ship, I said, and heard startled shouts from inside and out, found out which circuits to cut so I wasn't broadcasting quite so broadly, and whispered, Why? Again I watched the emotion play across his face, saw him swallow down what could only be regret. Because we couldn't save your body, he managed, and the ragged sob lurching out of his throat caught us all by surprise. Davarel was by his side in an instant, wrapping an arm around his shoulders, hugging him close and glaring at me like it was my fault. It wasn't his glare that silenced me, though. It was the new and sudden knowledge that I was a spaceship, that my human body was dead, while somehow I lived on. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to cry, then wondered if I could. Along the way, I discovered I could make the sound. There was something to be said for the speed of thought and computer processing. I shut the audio down and let myself weep in private, all the while watching his lordship get himself under control. When he shrugged Davarel away, I was waiting. We did all we could, he said. If I'd had a face, I'd have been glaring at him, and it would have been a better glare than the one Davarel gave me. I channeled what I was feeling into my voice instead, not entirely surprised when the speakers gave me exactly the tone I wanted. But I'm still dead. Your body is dead, your shell, but your mind. He sighed. We managed to save that. And your personality, too, I see. He had no right to sound that relieved. I'm going to need time to process this, I said, and shut down. I guess I was better integrated than I thought because I woke up not wanting to scream. Somewhere in my little computer closeout, I'd latched onto the idea that I could still fly, that actually I could fly better now because it really was what I was built for. There were even star charts in the files, a whole 2 dimensions worth. But that wasn't the first question I asked when I surfaced. How many survived? They were still on the quarterdeck, the control center, whatever, and both looked very relieved to hear me. "You're back," his lordship said. "Good. Now open the thrice damned door," Daverell snarled. I couldn't help it. I giggled. That only seemed to worsen Daverell's mood, but this time the glare was reserved for his lordship. "I'll go check on Dvorash and Semil," he said. "You set her straight." Yeah, like that was going to happen. I ran through pre-flight like a pro. Looked like my physical transition wasn't the only thing that had been assimilated. Daverell stopped midway across the control center. "Don't you dare," he muttered, and then turned to his lordship. "Tell her she can't." Now his lordship started to smile, his mood reflecting the sudden elation I was feeling. "Well, you wanted her to fly," he said. "Yes, but not now. Please tell her to cool her jets." I cooled them before his lordship could ask. It wasn't hard. I had questions, things I wanted to know. Survivors? Turned out I really didn't want to know. From the control center, I wasn't the only one to end up as a ship, but I was one of the few who'd made it through the transition quickly and completely.